Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Friday the 28th of March. I'm Stephen Ridgway. So following on from the Chrome patches that were pushed out earlier this week, there are now also Firefox patches been made available by Mozilla. This is all related one way or another to a Sandbox escape vulnerability. Turns out it wasn't just Chrome that had this issue. There was a similar, although probably not currently exploited, vulnerability in Firefox. So hopefully you will have spotted and updated Chrome if you're using Chrome. If you are, as many of us do, running multiple browsers, don't forget every now and then fire all of them up and just check to see if there are updates or patches available, and keep them all up to date. Firefox being one to look at the moment. Just as an aside, has anybody else noticed this, that when Chrome has pulled down an automatic update and is sitting there with the relaunch browser to apply patches or whatever it is, on my device it appears to use a significant amount of CPU whilst it sits in that state, and I do wonder whether they've coded that in as irritation-ware that will get you to click on the yes okay relaunch button. It seems to happen too often for it just to be coincidence. Don't know. Anyway, if you've seen that and you've been irritated by it like me, you're not alone. Also, though, following on from the Firefox and Chrome patches, the Tor browser has been updated. So if you are a privacy-focused individual, or you work in a particular role where privacy is important to you, be aware that Tor Browser 14.0.8, which is available for Windows and can be downloaded directly from Tor themselves, it addresses the vulnerabilities that there are in Firefox. The issues from Firefox, by the way, are Windows issues in Firefox, but it is always good to keep on top, even if you're on top of patches and updates, even if you're not using Windows. So the Tor project has released updates as well. Probably even more important, if you have a reason to be using a Tor browser, then you almost definitely need to be aware of these vulnerabilities and be applying the patches and updates ASAP. And then finally from me, for today, and in fact for this week, I came across a very interesting article on HelpNet Security that talks about how to manage and protect your biometric data. Now, long-term listeners to the briefing will be well aware of the fact that I have some concerns about how especially biometric authentication, is being touted as a all singing, all dancing solution to all problems in the authentication space, which it really isn't. This article quite rightly points out that biometric data, whilst unique, is unchangeable. So there is a potentially significant risk that if the details of your biometric data leak out, they can be used, because in the end, your fingerprint reader just creates a digital it converts your fingerprint into a digital representation. Well, if you've got a copy of the digital representation and a means to inject that into the path between the reader and the chip doing the authentication, for example, you don't need to actually have the fingerprint on the right fingerprint on the reader. And before anybody goes, oh, come on, that's just, that's the world, that's a fantasy land vulnerability. That's a real one. That one has been seen in certain laptops that use fingerprint readers. There was no encryption between the reader and the security chip, and in fact there was no authentication that the data coming, the data being ingested by the security chip on the device actually had come from the fingerprint reader. So that was an exploitable vulnerability. I'm not going to go and dig out the articles about it, but a quick Google search will, if you're interested, will show you that it has. And that particular example, yes, it did get fixed. However, it just demonstrates that this stuff is not foolproof. So there is a problem if your biometric data gets out there, that it can be used. Now, one way around that, of course, is to use biometric data as MFA. So it can be a factor, but if it's the only factor, it's not particularly secure. So people can inject other, if it's, okay, I've not been very articulate. If you store that data somewhere, if that can be replaced with something else, then that something else can be used for authentication. So let's say if you look at, say, iOS devices, Android devices, I believe also store your biometrics locally. Now that's quite a good idea, because if it's stored centrally, that opens it up to all sorts of attacks. There are pros and cons, right? Again, about is it more secure to have something stored centrally in the cloud, or is it more secure to have it stored locally on the device? So it depends a bit on how it's being stored, but they're stored locally to avoid cloud breach issues. If, though, you have the access to the device, you could, at least theoretically, replace, say, my fingerprint on my device with your fingerprint on my device under my account name, and then that would authenticate you as me on my device. That kind of thing is an issue. And the other side of it is then, well, okay, if it's legitimate and I've got my own fingerprint is the thing that's being used. Well, if you manage to rip it from my device and then you apply it to all sorts of other devices, you might find things where I've also got fingerprints stored, which would then log you on without me actually having to be present. So there are lots of issues in this space. This is a good article if you are, like me, concerned that the hype has overtaken the security with this, and that we are potentially building up a problem for the future. This is a good primer document that explains some of the issues quite well, and I would recommend that you take a look at it. Okay, that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good day. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you all again on Monday morning.